Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Maria.
And thank you for singing so nicely. I can sit down because you sung my perfect prayer for me. Thank you. We're going to, I'll be referring to Matthew, of course, chapter 6, 9 through 13, and Luke 11 to 24. You all should know what's there. If you don't know, go home and read the whole thing. When I was asked if I would come up and speak, and at first I thought, what could I possibly speak about? When I was teaching at the university, I was teaching classes that we can't even mention in this room. But they all had to do with growing up and marriage and family and so on. But I'm going to try very hard not to sound like a college professor today, or a therapist, but just a member of this congregation. And I'm one of the newer members, not only to this congregation, but to the congregational church as well. And you'll hear me talking about why I'm telling you that, okay? I chose something, I thought, you should only talk about things that you really understand and know. And I certainly know the Lord's Prayer, as you all do. But I'm going to tell you a few things about the Lord's Prayer that you may never have read about or heard. I've been blessed because my life led me on such a crooked path, not crooked, but a wonderful path, where I learned to say the Lord's Prayer in a few languages. You're going to hear me saying those prayers a little bit today. I promise not to talk too long in any one of them because you probably won't know the language I'm speaking. But at the end of talking, at the end of our service, I did print out, it's written in Aramaic, and I'm sure you can all read Aramaic. But I did write there's a phonetic, I don't speak Aramaic, but there is a phonetic prayer that I found on the internet, so you can at least practice your Aramaic. That is the only language, by the way, that Jesus Christ spoke. As a matter of fact, at that time when Jesus was teaching, everyone in that part of the world was speaking Aramaic. They were using some Hebrew in the temples and so on. And of course, the more educated people were the ones that were speaking Hebrew and then later Greek. But Christ never taught in Greek. He never, although my grandma would argue with that. If ever you've watched Eric Metaxas, and he says, he tells about his parents. His mother was German, his father was Greek. And he says, so if you grow up in a household like that, you're raised as a Greek. Trust me, it's true. And Jerry can tell you, he's still trying to learn to speak to me in Greek. He should understand. I'm glad he can't understand what I say when I talk. At any rate, so I am talking about something I know, and I always start by seeing what other people have said or written about it. And I found a dictionary that says, prayer is the act of attempting to communicate, commonly with a sequence of words, with a deity or a spirit, for the purpose of worship or requesting guidance. And that's all they wrote. And I know that, and you know that the Lord's Prayer is much more than that. And so is prayer in general. We started our prayers today. I was very grateful myself when I heard Wendy say, let's start with prayers of praise. Because so often we start our prayers with, Lord, please help me, please give me, I need, I want. You know. And we use prayer for all kinds of things, don't we? And there are all kinds of prayers. One that a lot of people know is something called the Serenity Prayer. And I actually, one time, had embroidered it. I didn't know the origin of it or anything, but it was a beautiful prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And boy, that suits all of us, because there are some times when we think we need something desperately, and God, in his lovely way, says, no, you don't, you need this, and it's usually much better. I found that for all the negative things that I've had to endure in my lifetime, I ended up living my life better than I did before. So it's a challenge, but have patience with you, with yourself, and with God. Prayers before meals are familiar to all of us, bless these gifts and so on. There are lots of different prayers that different faiths would say, and maybe different families. In our house, my son was just happy to come and eat as often as he could. So, if you've had sons, you know that. He also brought the entire football team, the entire track team. A lot of kids were eating spanakopita that evening. Some people look for a prayer to find a job. I've done that, the right job. Or selling a home. Did you know some people will bury a statue? And that one threw me for a loop, but if it works, use it. Some people pray for a baby and so on. There's even a prayer in one of my prayer books, and I love the title. It's simply said, a prayer for what you don't know what to pray for, something like that. So even if you don't know what to pray for, pray. There are prayers for peace, of course, and we all need peace in our country right now, especially. There are prayers to win a battle, to have courage to heal quickly, and on and on and on. And the amazing thing to me always is, with all these masses of people all over the world praying, he must be God because he hears every one of them. And that is amazing. And usually when he doesn't answer the prayers that we ask for, it's because it's really not for our own good. One of the prayers which I say often, and it's traditionally, I know of it as being used in the Orthodox faith, but it's a nice short prayer, and I was watching a film one time about a monastery, and one of their rules was that they had to pray continuously. And I saw the one monk was praying this prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Everybody can say that one because everybody qualifies. We could spend hours, days, and years learning our prayers. When to pray them, where to pray them, how to address God, and what's the best vocabulary, language, tone, or method of praying. Depending on where you are, you're taught different things. Every time we sing a hymn, we're singing a prayer. Every time someone mentions something out of the Bible, a passage, that's a prayer. So we're praying all the time. There are a lot of different interpretations of the same prayer. The Lord's Prayer, you'll find in the handout that, I hope I put it in there, that when Christ spoke, he didn't say, "Our Father who art in heaven." That was a translation of a translation of a translation. In Aramaic, it was something like, "Our Father," which, by the way, the word Father was special to the prayer. Every word that God spoke in that prayer, that Jesus spoke in that prayer, is the perfect word. He said, "Our Father." He never said, "My Father." There's not the singular I or my or mine once in that prayer. It's always we, our. Our Father. How many of you have someone in your life, whether it's an uncle and an aunt, or a neighbor, a person, one of your parents' friends when you were young, that you called Dad or Pop, or maybe called her Aunt Alice or Mom, or whatever? My son's friends used to always call me Mom when they were at the house. So using the word Father, our Father, that was a special prayer. Not in Aramaic, because you'll hear that word later, but in Hebrew, it's Abba. And Abba became Papa, and Papa became Daddy, and I don't know how all that happened, but it all goes back to that part. When I was a teacher and a chaplain, especially when I was a chaplain, but the kids, one time I was praying, when I retired, I didn't retire, I failed retirement. So I failed it miserably. And Jerry will vouch for that, because I continued teaching even after I married him 2 years ago, but once he was well. But one time, you know that part of your start of your school day where you say the Pledge of Allegiance, where you're supposed to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then they say, bow your head, or a moment of silence, they used to say. And one day I was standing there on the side of the room with some fifth graders, a bunch of fifth graders, And as I do always, and I'm sure some of you have seen me cross myself. That's, I'm Greek Orthodox at the beginning, and that's how I do it. So every prayer closes with the sign of the cross.
Awesome.
And this little boy was watching me like this, and he came over to me when he had a chance, and he said, "Were you praying?" And I said, "Yes, I was." "You pray every day?" Because he was watching me every day. And I said, "Yes, I do." And then he said, "What do you say when you pray?" I said, "Well, every day when we come to class, I say, thank you, God, for bringing us all to class. Help us to learn at least one wonderful thing today. Help us to have a lot of fun. Help us to go home so tired, but can't wait to come back to school tomorrow morning." And that little boy, I met later when he was out of school, out of high school. He's a grown man. And he came over. Big, tall man. I recognized him, but he remembered that I prayed. So you never know who's watching you when you pray. And all of us who have children and grandchildren around, especially, they're watching you to see what you do. So pay attention when you pray. Teach them to pray. There is one prayer that leads all prayers. It can be found in every single Bible. It's known in every language on the face of this earth. It has been said ever since around the 1st century. It's a prayer that is a condensation of everything we should know from the Bible. Everything from the Bible is in that prayer. Everything we need to know in order to live the perfect Christian life. I call it my perfect prayer. I got notes because I'm over 50 and I didn't want to leave anything out. Besides, Jerry kept saying, "Have you prepared yet? Have you prepared?" Don't worry. How blessed we are to have St. Matthew and St. Luke. When writing about Jesus and the Sermon on the Mount, that's where the prayer was originally taught. Matthew gave us a beautiful gift of reporting and recording a most wonderful guide to living and to praying. Read Matthew. Read what's said before the Lord's Prayer. Read about Jesus saying, "Go into a quiet room." About him saying, "Don't use flowery language and don't repeat prayers in public and so that everyone can see that you're praying." It's you talking to God. And give him a chance. Listen. Just listen. Just be quiet and listen sometimes. The Sermon on the Mount is a beautiful thing. And it's all wonderful, but the best part for me is the instruction that Jesus gave us in Matthew 6 to 15, 1 to 15, forgive me. When asked about prayer, Jesus was very clear about praying, how to pray, where to pray, and so on. Jesus and everyone else in that place understood Aramaic, and it was the only language they all spoke, as I said earlier. There's only one difference in the Lord's Prayer in most translations, but I've printed out so you can see what the words in Aramaic were. They mean the same thing. They mean "Our Father, who art in heaven," and so on, but really quite beautiful. The only difference, though, in the Lord's Prayer that the Aramaic translation gives us, instead of saying, "Lead us not into temptation," it was misinterpreted. And one of the scholars studying in the Bible is constantly being studied and torn apart and turned upside down and everything else. But someone found that he didn't say, "Lead us not into temptation." He said, "Do not let us go into temptation." The argument being that our Father would never lead us into temptation. He would just prevent us from going there. And in the Greek version, the Orthodox version, it's danger. The word is danger. So it's whatever fits you, that's your temptation or your danger. Aramaic was used by Jesus and all those who heard him. I repeated myself. I guess I was impressed with that. Anyway, the language is still spoken. and by many people in the Middle East. And it's based all Arabic, Semitic, they're all called Semitic languages, Arabic, Aramaic, and there are several other dialects, call them, of the same language. Just like here, if you brought somebody from Europe who had never heard English in the United States, and you had them come to Boston, where every now and then somebody from Boston calls me Maria. And then you brought them down south where somebody would say Maria. It's the same language, but the dialects make the difference. And sometimes we just can't understand it. I'm going to read you a little bit of the beginning of the Arabic Lord's Prayer, of the Aramaic Lord's Prayer. And there's a copy of it in the folder. So you have it, right? They'll be passed out to you later. And I'm not going to chant it, but it's generally chanted. Okay? It's Abum Debashma Aya Nartike Dak Shma Deite Malpeo Ra. It takes one word to say Our Father who is in heaven. Abum. That's one word, but it says which art in heaven. So I'll let you have fun reading it, and maybe you want to come up here one day and show us what you learned. Okay. Abum. This is what it says from an Aramaic scholar. O thou from whom the breath of life comes. And Dishwash Jinad Yah, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration. Okay. May your light be experienced in my utmost loss. Your heavenly domain approaches. Thy kingdom come. Your heavenly domain approaches. Okay, it goes on, and you have the full translation is in your packet. And as I keep saying, I would continue, but I think you'd rather have me not talk in Aramaic. So, the Lord's Prayer, by the way, is only in 2 books of the entire Bible, Luke and Matthew. Okay. Now, what happened with me was I realized that I can say the Lord's Prayer in a few languages, and it made me think of my grandmother, my father's mother. I spent a lot of time with her. My parents were divorced, and my grandmother really had me. She actually, when I was born, she delivered me, so she's been with me, was with me forever. So she taught me to say what we call the Paterimon. Okay? Paterimon, very simply, Our Father. Okay? Paterimon, oenis urano, hagia yethot onamasu, elifeto to basiliasu. That means, may your kingdom come, and genifeto to masu means teach us your words, what you want to know. And may we keep your rules on earth, as it's kept in heaven in here. When it's said, it's not said, I have to start again. Let's give this. As it is, thank you. I'm going through it in Greek and English.
Right.
But you don't say on earth as it is in heaven. On the contrary. On earth as it is in heaven. It's done that way in heaven. Do it here too. But we often pause at that place. But in the Greek you would say, no, let's hope we behave here as they do in heaven without question. Right? And it says, that means, give us this day our daily bread. But it doesn't say daily bread. It says, take care of our needs daily. Not bread, but bread is, everybody needs bread. Bread keeps us alive. And forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. But it means forgive us for hurting people who love us as we forgive those who hurt us. Could be sinning against them. And lead us not into temptation is kehemis and ikis emas on simeron. Simeron is danger. So it would be danger. And alarise himas apotuno poneru. That's when we stop. That's